Welcome. Like I said, today we have another special guest, Jim Gabriel. It's really weird actually saying Jim Gabriel because Jim is actually my uncle. He's my uncle, business partner, consigliere. So yeah, to kind of give a little bit of background on Jim, it's like super weird saying that. So like if I catch myself in the episode,
It's okay.
That's why. But Jim runs a company called MODLOGIQ. They're a modular construction company, and he's kind of here today on the Byte Club podcast to talk about ConTech, or construction technology. So if you want to just introduce yourself, kind of tell a little bit about your story, how you got to where you are, and how you got into modular construction.
Sure, yeah. It is weird, so we'll get that out of the way, but it's an awesome opportunity, so thanks for having me. Yeah, so I've been in modular construction, for the better part of 30 years. I used to be 25 years and holding, but I've finally relented and said now it's 30. It just makes me feel really old. But modular, I worked for GE back in the 90s, and it was really construction trailer business, and I always saw it as something that was progressive in terms of a method of construction. Nobody taught me that, but I saw it as something that provided, companies like GE at the time with the ability to be able to provide commercial space faster, more cost effectively. And so on those two, factors, faster, less expensive, generally are more cost effective. My thought was there's something here, right? Something that's commercially viable that people will want more of, faster, more cost effective deployment of space, both temporary and permanent. And so GE was a GE Modular Space was a temporary building company, and it wasn't something that interested me. I always wanted to sort of take the application of this method and apply it to permanent construction. So flash forward, I became the owner of MODLOGIQ in a little more than a year ago, and have really sort of taken a company that was really experienced at what they do and sort of with a long history, but not very well known, and sort of no longer on the edge of commercial modular building construction and technology. They developed a unique process, a build-together process that hadn't really evolved into something that integrated more, construction technology and then eventually, automation, which is what we're working towards.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I don't know if you want to maybe explain for our listener just a little bit about because you guys have a big warehouse over in Lancaster, whatever the proper pronunciation is, and those modular pieces, I think, from my standpoint, is super interesting because they are kind of placed almost like puzzle pieces, right?
Sure.
But you guys design and produce the actual puzzle pieces. You don't do the physical construction, correct?
We do. We do both, right? And so we're design assist. So that warehouse, we like to affectionately refer to it as a manufacturing facility, but it's okay. We have a modular manufacturing facility in New Holland, Pennsylvania, and it is it's about 60,000 square feet of manufacturing space. We don't produce everything in our facility. Lots of projects, large scale projects. Some of the we just completed about a 65,000 square foot elementary school project that was too big to fit in our facility. So we'll build parts and pieces. But to answer your question, we design. So we're design assist. So we'll work with an architect to take a conventional plan and modularize it. Modularizing it means that we'll break it down into modules that we can ship over the road. So everyone in our business, in this space, whether it's residential modular or commercial modular, the dimensional parameters are all the same because you can only ship something so wide and so long and so tall over the road. So we take that sort of modularization a step further and apply it to most people understand modular construction on the residential side, and it's usually either one module, which is a manufactured home typically, or two modules. Three modules might be a modular home. We take a facility and we'll break it down into 100 modules, 300 modules, depending on the size of the building. And so we'll help design it. We'll produce the steel framed boxes, and everything we build is steel and concrete. And then we'll fabricate. We'll take those steel framed boxes and we'll bolt them together horizontally and vertically, and then it becomes a conventional project from there. Take it to a high degree of completion, interior and exterior finishes, mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems, and then we take it apart and we ship it to the site, and then we reassemble it.
That's actually super cool. So you had mentioned, and it's a different way of traditional construction, but you had mentioned that when the first company you started at, that was GE Modular.
Yeah.
You said it was more cost effective and more efficient. I'm assuming it's become more efficient, but it's still more cost effective. Is that the main reason for going, kind of the modular route, is because of cost, or is it more just an efficiency thing to kind of quickly get it assembled?
Yeah, so the cost thing is it's more the cost. It's more of an equation, right? As opposed to it's cheaper to build modular, right? The prevailing understanding or perception of modular is that it's cheaper. It's not. It can be more cost effective depending on the relative cost of labor. And it can also be more efficient depending on how standardized the product is. We build a custom version, which takes conventional materials and, as I just described, brings them into an assembly process. So it's the same materials, same labor. What we do is we're more efficient in how we execute the work, because we're not subject to weather delays and issues that happen typically on site, right? So we're taking the big portion of that work off site and we're controlling the variables that can impact cost. So we don't necessarily say that we're less expensive, but we are more cost certain, if that makes sense. So I think McKinsey did a study of projects, commercial projects over $10 million. The average cost increase is between 28 and 36%. That's because of all those variables: design changes, weather issues, things that you don't have a lot of control over. In the modular fabrication process, the design has to stop, right? That's where most of the changes come from. So we have to just stop design, and then we have to go to production. Conventionally, it's, well, let's get it to a certain point, and then they can get started on site, and we can get the GC going, and then we'll make all these other decisions along the way, and then those decisions change, and they get bigger and more elaborate or whatever, right? And then the owner-driven changes can impact cost. So it's more cost efficient. It's a more cost-certain path to take for certain types of projects.
That's actually super interesting, because construction, and especially what you just described there, is very similar to what we do at AdSap with our kind of project planning and figuring out a fixed price for a certain project, and the whole change orders, design chains, but the one thing that we don't have is that variable of a project being delayed or changed because of weather. That is honestly probably one of the best selling points. I never thought of that for like, kind of your industry there. Because we don't run into that issues at AdSep where like, we have delays, sure, but it's usually because of like, holidays or, you run into an issue trying to solve some sort of algorithm or software problem or bug fix, but you don't run into like those unknown weather delays or like, things like that. So that's a super interesting part. And have you seen like the technology, this modular technology kind of improve that? And like how practical is what are the limitations, I guess is my biggest question. Like
Sure.
if you have to take everything off site, and you're in this not a warehouse, but you called it manufacturing facility. What are the limitations? Like, is there something that you can't do because you're building off site now?
Sure. Yeah, limitations are mostly dimensional, right? And so, I was building modular convenience stores in the late 90s and early 2000 when they were a simple, mobile or BP gas station. It was an accessory, right? They were selling gas, and then they also sold convenience store type products, bread, milk, eggs, cigarettes, right? So it was a simple building. And then Sheetz came along and others started building larger, more grand facilities that had these big, wide open spaces and large open areas. And I mentioned earlier, we have dimensional parameters that don't allow us to build tall, wide open spaces. So the modules are limiting, and then the module sizes are limiting, and then there's only so much we can ship over the road. So most of the limitations are dimensional, but some applications just don't make a lot of sense, right? A big open warehouse, like a prefabricated or a pre-engineered steel building, we get a lot of requests for that, but it's just wide open space, right? So we would literally be shipping air instead of, a complete, medical facility or a complete retail facility. So the limitations are dimensional. Some of the limitations are circumstantial. Sometimes it doesn't make a lot of sense to build offsite. So what we work with our clients is helping them understand, and candidly helping us understand when we bring value to a project. And it's usually when those limitations can press the boundary of what the budget can support, right? So we can build big, grand, stacked modules on top of modules, but in the end, does it make a lot of sense financially? And are we solving a problem that maybe doesn't exist? If we're just competing against conventional construction and it's a dollar for dollar sort of evaluation, listen, when I started doing this, it was, you can get the work if you can be competitive with conventional construction. Well, if I can be competitive with conventional construction, I have more business than I have to do with. It's really the circumstances that create the opportunity for us to be able to leverage all the benefits of modular. A hospital that has to that needs to increase capacity to see more patients, to improve the ability for a healthcare organization to improve patient care. A modular solution, and we do lots of healthcare types of applications for that reason. Speed to market, we can get it there faster. And we have probably more than most the ability to be able to take a customized approach to building. So its limitations can be based on budget, it can be based on the dimensional, sort of limitations, but it's circumstantial as to when modular makes the best sense for offsite construction.
Cool. So kind of going off of that, I think, at least myself, I don't want to speak for other people, but when you think of modular construction, all these what do you call them, prefabbed kind of pieces, it seems to tie into technology. I mean, those, we can talk about the software that's going to help design the layouts and all the different things like that. I'm sure there's technology that helps figure out how those pieces are deconstructed into, smaller pieces to be shipped. But in this episode, I kind of wanted to touch upon something that you had informed me about maybe a year ago, this topic of ConTech. And for the listeners who don't know what ConTech is, it's construction technology. So it's this idea of software kind of being ingrained, or technology being ingrained in the construction industry, and how that kind of improves construction as a whole. And I think that the industry that you're in, the modular construction industry, is kind of leading the way in that. I don't know if you want to share some of your ideas, but I know you've brought up to me different ideas around different kind of technology or software that could help improve the modular construction industry, world, and just kind of change, like in my opinion, change the way people build things, or how contractors would interact with and build different things.
Sure. Yeah. So construction technology is, so modular construction, at least in my view, is the output of construction technology, right? It's not construction technology like some people may think of it. It's a method of construction. So some people may see that as, wow, modular construction is really, a technological improvement over of conventional construction, right? But it's a method of construction that's really driven by, and it's no different than it's the same technology that today at least is driving improvements in conventional construction. The means and methods. It's really methods. It's really digitizing process. So when you do that, you now have the ability to be able to, and you know this better than I do, right? It's all about the inputs, right? It's you're coding, right? You're inputting the code. So you're designing something, and then you're taking that, you're digitizing that, right? You're taking your client's wants, needs, taking that into a project plan. Now you can digitize that into something that your software, whether it's Apple, Android, whatever it is, can interpret and output, right? It's the same thing that we do, and and what's driving construction and the improvement in construction, and not just speed, efficiency, and cost, but all the environmental things that can all the construction activities that can have an impact on the environment, right? And so, but it starts with the digital inputs, right? What the digital inputs for us is BIM, building information modeling. So most of our work is done in Revit and BIM, and then that becomes, and I'll give you a good example of it. So that becomes what we then take, it's a foundation of our process. Candidly, our process in building is still it's decidedly unautomated, but we're working toward improving our processes, both the digital process. Physical process is translated to digital process that can now have that can now be inputted into a machine, a welding machine, which we're working to add to our process on the front end, any sort of we're technology. We're looking to add light gauge metal roll forming machines, so machines that will produce the metal studs, the metal building studs and components that we will then build our buildings with, right? But it all starts with BIM. The inputs from the design have to be consistent with what that machine will accept. And so that's, and so a lot of people kind of confuse construction technology with robotics and automation, right? Robotics and automation come from the digital inputs, software that allows the physical to be transferred into or translated into something that can be produced automatically.
Gotcha. And that's super interesting to me because in my world, in the software world, you talk about inputs and them being reusable to kind of, this process, this process you have of, manufacturing these different modular parts through this process. And the thing that's so interesting to me and how that relates to my world with software is that we're very big on having reusable components. Like think of a login screen for a website, mobile app. Every app or software you use has a different login screen. It might look different, but the inputs are all the same. Username, password, email, password. And being able to reuse those components is very important to kind of streamline and automate and make that process more efficient. So, when you talk about that, it almost reminds me of, the software world. I see a lot of parallels. Now, the only difference is I think we produce a digital product where you produce a physical product that's put out into the world. And so one of the things I kind of want to ask you about, I'm kind of, curious about too, is in my world with software, there's a lot of regulations around, IP rights, data protection laws, COPA laws, that clients and customers have to abide by. But again, this is a digital world, and in your world, you're building a physical product, kind of, again, reusing these inputs as you put it, BIM or BIM. Mm-hmm. But I'm curious, how does that line up with kind of staying up to date with different building codes and stuff like that? Is that all automated? Like that, in my opinion, that has to be able to improve that process now because it's I know you had mentioned it's still a very labor intensive process, but all those inputs kind of have to drive automation and efficiency along those lines.
Yeah. I mean, you hit on the challenge of full on automation of construction, even in a particular category or sector. Multifamily housing, right? The biggest challenge we have is providing affordable housing. All across the country, but it's the challenge is that you can't just mass produce modular buildings without having to consider code compliance for a particular area, right? And so you could do that if you say, listen, we're just going to build for the state of New York and and narrow that down to New York City, right? Which, believe me, you could make a good business just producing that, right? But there's lots of challenges there too. But it's a challenge. Now there are efforts in the International Building Code, standards and things like that to be able to minimize that. But you're really, codes and code compliance is a regional thing, right? And so I couldn't build a building, and without and ship it to California without making certain that building is going to meet codes, right? We have lots of clients who say, listen, I want to build 20 of these retail buildings, and I want to be able to deploy them anywhere in the U.S. Not very cost effective, because I would have to build that for the highest seismic, the highest wind load, the highest code standards, and you couldn't afford it because most places wouldn't need a building that is coded for California to be to ship it to Pittsburgh or to place it in Pittsburgh. And so that's a bit of the challenge. It's the code compliance, but it's there are other agencies that regulate UL and other agencies that regulate the approval of certain components. So there is a level of standardization you can get to. It just doesn't allow you to just with a high degree of certainty mass produce buildings that can be sited anywhere.
This might be a dumb question, but in terms of so this is my biggest gripe right now is the place where I live. There's it's finished construction, but some of the amenities are not open because of they're waiting for the inspection to pass all building codes or whatever it may be. These modular pieces, are they inspected prior to being shipped, or are they only inspected once they're constructed at the location?
Yeah, great question, and it is unique to what we do because every state, every city, every county has their local building approval process, co-compliant officer, and so jurisdictional requirements, and so we use a third-party approval. So some states have a modular program. You have to get modular builders have to be certified to be able to build, but we use a third-party agency that will inspect on behalf of the agency having jurisdiction. So we just cited some buildings here in Pittsburgh and just had a conversation about we're deficient in a few things because they're not used to the process. We have a third party that they're not 100%. So there's still some challenges with that, but for the most part, we are able to meet those co-compliant requirements, and a lot of that happens digitally, right? So we're capturing. So you can't just stop. So we have a production process. That production process has to have a start and an end. And that's the efficiency that comes in, we talked about earlier, right? And so it has to have a start and an end. We can't stop it to have an inspector from Allegheny County or wherever, New York, fly down. So a third party helps us with that, but they're not always available at a minute's notice to people. So we capture a lot, digitally, and we have, we have, and it's all, part of their process. But construction technology is even though we aren't highly automated, construction technology is a solid part of our production process.
So where do you see in I guess the current state of the world and then, kind of future state of the world in the, when I say world, I mean the construction industry. Where do you see construction tech really being the biggest game changer? Is it in these inputs or in modular construction? Is there in other ways that you see being a big?
Well, I think it's an ability to be able to reduce, the labor component, because everyone has. Modular construction isn't new, right? Prefabricated offsite construction isn't something that just came along. Some people believe that, right? I've been doing it for 30 years, but it's the economics that's really driving the importance of it and the impact of it, right? Labor, the reduction in labor, availability of labor means fewer contractors, fewer subcontractors. Those contractors are taking on more work. And so these more projects are being done by fewer contractors, and they're taking longer, right? So construction technology, ConTech, is having an impact on that, will have an even greater impact on that. It's, candidly, it's entrepreneurs like you who are looking at opportunities to be able to participate in that, because there's no limit to it. It's not something. It's like computers were in the early mid 70s to early 80s, right? It was starting out, and people weren't 100% sure how this was going to impact life and culture and personal, and had no idea how it was going to impact personal productivity to the point that it does today with from this gigantic supercomputer to the handheld version of that. I think construction technology and construction is moving in a similar way to improve the ability to be able to not just produce but manage the built environment, be able to improve the ability to make changes, adjustments. There's all kinds of things when we are in the process of some project we're working on that have a requirement. It's called a digital twin, right? And so we're designing and building, the physical and the digital version for future reference.
Yeah, so that's super interesting. So, for our listeners that on this show who are entrepreneurs and kind of, are listening to this show because they might have a software technology idea that they might want to take from idea to product to market. would you say that there, obviously I think you would agree that there is definitely a space in that realm for construction technology. So, if you could give an entrepreneur advice around the construction industry and how to kind of, develop a product for the construction industry, what advice would you give them, and what kind of route would you kind of push them towards it? Like, for an example, say, hey, maybe it makes sense that I think you should focus on building technology or software that solves problem A or problem B. Do you have any insights or advice?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, your question reminds me of a graphic that I saw at a construction conference that McKinsey produced, right? And this will resonate with entrepreneurs because entrepreneurs are looking for opportunity. Mm-hmm. So, and this is roughly what the graph displayed, that over the last 100 years, in 3 specific industries, the pace, the productivity based on automation in car manufacturing was, so what technology did to improve their productivity was 800%, right? 800% increase over the last 100 years in productivity because of technology. In agriculture, right, I think it was something like 600%, right? What do you think construction was?
1,000%? Higher than that.
6%. 6%. So technology and the improvement in the productivity in construction was somewhere like 6 to 8%, right? Wow. In other words, huge opportunity for entrepreneurs. And that's already being impacted. I think that survey, and I'll send you that, right? I'll find it and send it. You can share it with your listeners, because that's where the opportunity is. That's where the opportunity is.
And that's kind of crazy to think about, because this is going to be a little bit off topic, but I am super interested in like the Egyptians and the Mayans, how they would build some of those pyramids and stuff like that. And today, like I always tell people, if my ideal vacation is not necessarily going to the beach. Now, you're aware I don't like the beach, but I like going to places like Disney World or Chicago, New York City, because I like seeing the things that humans build. It's incredible to me, like the skyscrapers in New York or in Chicago. It's incredible to me that humans built this. And I kind of had this view in my mind that we've evolved so well over the years in like producing buildings in the construction industry, but it seems like really there's a huge opportunity to improve that process. The processes don't seem to be fully functioning yet.
No, I would say, just based on what you described, go down to near the arena where they're building the FMB center. Go sit in that park and watch that construction process. You would wonder why we haven't evolved further. Now, and I don't want to disparage, because I actually know there are some really cool things that they're doing there, but it's still very conventional. And if you're, and I mean, that's, the subtle impact of construction technology having. You really, some kids don't know it, but just watch a typical construction project anywhere in the country, and then I'll show you a modular construction project that either we did or that one of our competitors produced, or somebody from our industry. I don't really consider anyone a competitor, but people in our industry are really good at what they do, and how fast buildings go up. You would be more impressed, and frankly more hopeful that maybe we have, there's hope for the human race, and we've somehow tapped into this ancient technology that the Egyptians, figured out a long time ago. But we're now, maybe, moving and finally, back again in the right direction.
Maybe that's how they did it. The Egyptians, maybe it was all modular.
It's all modular. Built it off-site. It's probably the first example of off-site construction, and maybe soon they'll discover that the cave that they built those pyramid modules in.
Right. Exactly.
That'd be cool.
I mean, honestly, if you think about it, it kind of makes a little bit of sense because they always talk about how would you carry this big stone, up this mountain or get it up in the air without any technology? Maybe it was modular.
Yeah, and maybe they're not that heavy. Maybe they're hollow inside.
Maybe.
Has anybody checked that out?
No,
I don't know. I don't think anybody has.
See, these are the real questions that the role leaders need to discuss. But yeah, so before we wrap up this episode, usually the last question I like to ask guests on the show is, a lot of our listeners, of course, are entrepreneurs, business owners. They're either starting a new business or they have a business and they want to kind of, automate their business or digitize their business. Or if they're an entrepreneur, they want to take their idea, their software product idea or mobile app idea from idea to product to market. So, like I said earlier, I consider you my consigliere, my trusted advisor. If it wasn't for you, I don't know that I would have kind of met the connections or built the network that I have today to kind of help me get my ideas off the ground. So if you can give one word of advice to young entrepreneurs or business owners, what would you tell them?
Don't overthink it. Don't overthink it, right? You had a great idea. All I did was say, give you some encouragement, and maybe much to your parents' dismay, decided to go off on your own, which I think is awesome, and I couldn't be more proud of you. But don't overthink it, right? People who are entrepreneurs have something that they're very good at. What they don't think they know enough of is how to run a business, right? All I did was surround you with people who knew how to do the things that you didn't know how to do, right? So, and you're doing things you've never done before, right? You're networking. You're not just networking, you're creating your own networking events, which that's right out of my playbook, right? Don't just participate, coordinate, right? Be the leader that you need to be for you and your business, and good things will happen. But simply don't overthink it, because you can overthink your way out of it. It's just not that complicated. It really isn't. And believe me, I'm living proof. If I could do it, anybody can. Anybody can.
Well, that's good. I think that's some great advice. Obviously, I appreciate it. You've been a huge help. And Jim, I hate saying that, but so Uncle Jim, yeah. Thank you for coming on the show. I think our listeners are going to greatly benefit from this. And for all you listeners out there, I highly encourage you to check out MODLOGIQ. It's a great company. Check out the modular construction industry and get more familiar with ConTech, because as we discussed here today, I think there's a huge opportunity in that world to help improve construction. So thanks again, and I'll have to have you back for another time.
Anytime. You're the best. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Thanks again.